If you've ever found yourself wondering about the unseen efforts to keep society safe, well, you're in for a treat today. Welcome to another deep dive. We're tackling a really fundamental question, one that shapes our communities.
Yeah, it's about the core difference, isn't it, between stopping a crime before it even happens?
I'm just reacting to it afterward.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to sort of pull back the curtain on the strategies aimed at preventing crime.
And show how it's far more nuanced than just, locking people up.
Right.
It's interesting, you see, modern criminology has really shifted its focus. For ages, the main thing was the punitive approach.
Apprehending, prosecuting, punishing.
Pretty much. The idea was deterrence through fear. But now there's much more emphasis on the preventative approach.
Which is more forward-looking?
Entirely. It's about identifying and tackling the conditions that lead to crime in the first place, intervening before it happens.
But how do you measure that? The crime that didn't happen?
That's the tricky part, the invisible success. But think bigger picture. It's not just reducing harm. It's also about lessening the huge financial and social costs tied to a purely reactive system.
That distinction is so important. Okay, so it's a multi-layered strategy we're talking about, not just one thing.
Definitely not one size fits all.
Our material highlights 3 main levels of prevention. Can you walk us through those, maybe starting with the broadest?
Absolutely. So first up is primary prevention. Think of it like public health for the whole community.
Okay.
It targets the entire population. The goal is to prevent crime by improving overall well-being, social conditions.
Like what specifically?
Well, broad things. Public awareness campaigns, maybe about drugs, or promoting education and job opportunities generally. Even things like better street lighting or CCTV in public spaces.
So making the whole environment less crime-friendly.
Precisely, making it inherently safer. Then you move to secondary prevention.
Okay, level 2.
This one's more targeted. It focuses on individuals or groups identified as at risk of becoming offenders.
At risk? How so?
Based on specific risk factors. So the interventions are tailored. Things like mentoring programs for youth who might be struggling, school counseling, family therapy maybe.
Or keeping kids busy constructively.
Exactly. Recreational programs, vocational training. They help divert people from paths that might lead to crime.
Right. That leaves the 3rd level, tertiary prevention. We've covered broad prevention, targeted prevention. What about people already in the system?
Yeah, prevention doesn't stop there. Tertiary prevention is aimed squarely at individuals who've already committed offenses, already interacted with the justice system.
And the goal there is?
To prevent recidivism, reoffending. That's the key.
How do you do that?
Through things like rehabilitation programs inside prisons, education, job training therapy, also probation and parole services providing support after release, even halfway houses to help ease reintegration into society.
It's all about breaking that cycle then.
It really is. Trying to stop the revolving door.
That idea of breaking the cycle feels critical, especially for secondary prevention too.
Yeah.
You mentioned identifying those at risk. Our material really stressed how vital early identification is.
Oh, absolutely central. Because the sooner you spot the risk, the better your chances of intervening effectively.
So how do we spot these risk factors? It sounds complex.
It can be. The sources point to a few key areas. The family environment is a big one.
Like?
Children from broken homes, kids experiencing neglect or abuse, maybe really inconsistent discipline, or even having family members involved in crime. These all raise the risk.
That makes sense. The home environment is so foundational.
Definitely. Then beyond the home, you've got wider social and economic factors.
Poverty, unemployment.
Yes, lack of access to good education, living in high crime, sort of disorganized neighborhoods. These all contribute significantly.
And what about friends? Peer pressure?
Huge. Peer influence, hanging out with delinquent peers, or bad company, as people say, that's highlighted as one of the strongest predictors for juvenile delinquency.
You know, that bad company thing really rings true, doesn't it? We probably all felt peer pressure, hopefully not towards crime, but...
You do know how powerful it can be. And finally, there are individual factors, too.
Like personality or behavior?
Yeah, things like behavioral issues, showing up young aggression, impulsivity, maybe substance abuse, doing poorly in school, truancy.
Wow, so it's a whole mix of things.
Yeah.
But who's actually doing the spotting, the identifying?
Good question. Our material points to key institutions, Teachers, they might notice changes in behavior at school.
Right.
Social workers assessing family situations, even community police officers, just by being present and observing, can identify youth who seem at risk.
And catching it early means you can step in sooner.
Exactly. Timely intervention is the goal, trying to steer someone away from that path before it gets too established.
Okay, so we've got the types of prevention.
Yeah.
But what does it look like, on the ground? Can you give us a concrete example?
Sure. Let's talk about attendance centers. Heard of those?
Vaguely. From the UK, right?
That's them. Started under the Criminal Justice Act of 1948. They're a non-custodial sentence, mostly for young offenders.
Non-custodial meaning not prison.
Right. The idea is to impose a penalty, losing leisure time to instill some discipline and responsibility, but without pulling them out of school or work.
How do they work in practice?
Typically, offenders have to attend for a set number of hours, often on a Saturday. They do structured activities.
Like what?
Physical training, maybe practical work like handicrafts, sometimes basic lessons on citizenship or health. The big advantage is avoiding the negative stuff from imprisonment.
Like being exposed to more hardened criminals or
Yeah.
the stigma?
Exactly. But of course, their success really hinges on the quality of the program and the individual's engagement. It's not a magic bullet.
Interesting. So that's one approach. You mentioned earlier that some older preventive measures were more about control, sometimes controversially.
Oh, definitely. A classic, stark example is vagrancy laws.
Laws against just wandering around without money.
Pretty much. Criminalizing being idle, having no visible means of support, and wandering. Historically, the preventive angle was that vagrancy was seen as leading to other crimes, theft, begging, being a nuisance.
So stop the vagrancy, stop the other crimes.
That was the rationale. But here's the crucial part of the criticism. These laws were often slammed for punishing a person's status being poor or homeless rather than a specific criminal act.
So it becomes a tool for social control.
Exactly. Used for harassment, discrimination against marginalized groups. It's why they've been mostly reformed or struck down. You see similar issues, similar criticisms with some state-level anti-begging laws in India today.
That's a really important point about how prevention can be misused. Speaking of India, how has crime prevention evolved there? You mentioned traditional systems.
India's journey is fascinating. Traditionally, you had things like village panchayats, community elders handling disputes, keeping order. Very informal, community-based prevention.
And then came the colonial era.
Right. Formal policing arrived, along with some deeply problematic laws like the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871.
The one that labeled whole communities as hereditary criminals.
Yes, incredibly discriminatory. Thankfully repealed after independence, post-independence brought major legal shifts towards reform.
Like what?
Well, the Probation Offenders Act, 1958, was huge. It really emphasized reform, rehabilitation, especially for first-time and young offenders. Allowed probation instead of just punishment, a big philosophical step.
And for children specifically.
The Juvenile Justice Act, a whole framework focused on care, protection, rehabilitation for kids in conflict with the law. Again, prioritizing reform.
So a clear move away from purely punitive measures. What about modern policing? Still community-focused.
It's a mix. You do have community policing programs now. Jana Maitri Suraksha in Kerala, Friends of Police in Tamil Nadu, trying to build trust, cooperation, get the community involved.
Makes sense. Better intelligence, better prevention.
Exactly. But alongside that, there's way more technology. CCTV is everywhere now. Crime mapping helps predict hotspots. Data analytics guide resource deployment. It's much more tech integrated.
Okay, let's zero in on a specific group mentioned in our material. Habitual offenders. Recidivists.
Right. A major focus for secondary and tertiary prevention because, statistically, they commit a disproportionate number of crimes.
How are they legally identified? Is there a set number of offenses?
It varies. They're usually identified based on their history of previous convictions with the exact criteria laid out in specific state laws.
And because they reoffend, there are stricter measures.
Yes, quite stringent preventive measures to try and control their activities. One is externment, often called Tadipar.
Tadipar? What's that?
Under acts like the Maharashtra Police Act, it allows authorities to order a habitual offender to actually leave a city or district if their presence is seen as a threat to public order.
Literally removing them. Wow. Does that work?
Well, that's the debate, isn't it? Does it deter or just move the problem elsewhere? Or maybe even isolate the person further? Then there's preventive detention.
Detention without trial.
For a limited period, yes. Under state laws, often called Gundas Acts, it's specifically to prevent actions seen as harmful to public order. And of course, strict police surveillance is common, requiring regular check-ins at the police station.
These sound like really forceful actions, which brings us to coercive measures more broadly.
Yeah, forceful state actions restricting liberty based just on suspicion of future offenses. Highly contentious, obviously.
Because they bump up against fundamental rights.
Exactly. The potential for infringement is high. Indian law, specifically the Code of Criminal Procedure, CrPC, has examples.
Gotcha.
Sections 106 to 110 deal with security for keeping the peace and for good behavior.
Security. Like a deposit.
Sort of. Executive magistrates can require people likely to disturb the peace or known habitual offenders to execute a bond, basically a promise backed by money for good behavior. If they refuse or can't provide it, they can be detained.
So a proactive demand for good behavior with teeth.
Pretty much. Another is preventive arrest under Section 151 of the CrPC.
When can police do that?
If an officer knows someone plans to commit a serious crime, a cognizable offense, and believes arresting them is the only way to stop it, they can arrest without a warrant.
But that detention isn't indefinite, right?
No, it's temporary and subject to judicial oversight. But it's still arrest based on suspicion, not a crime already committed.
It really highlights that delicate balance, doesn't it? The state's duty to maintain order versus protecting individual liberty.
Absolutely. It's not just academic. It's about real lives, real rights. That's why there are supposed to be strict legal procedures and judicial review to try and prevent misuse of these powers.
But getting that balance right, that seems like the core challenge.
It is. It's the constant tension in this whole field.
What a fascinating deep dive. We've really seen crime prevention is, well, complex, it's evolving, it's multi-layered.
And goes so far beyond just punishment.
Right. It's about being proactive, looking at root causes, trying to build a better environment, not just react to problems.
And understanding it means grappling with that constant tension. Societal safety versus individual freedom. It's a negotiation that never really ends.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a thought to mull over. What if we measured the success of prevention not just by counting the crimes that didn't happen, those invisible wins, but by the overall well-being, the quality of life in a community? Would that change our priorities? What new approaches might emerge then?
And how do we keep refining that balance between protecting liberty and ensuring security as society keeps changing?
Something to think about until our next deep dive.